told you all, I'm an attorney. I've done several presentations on judicial accountability. I will also tell you that as an attorney, I'm used to standing up in front of the judge and doing my closing arguments without a podium, without a PowerPoint, without a video camera, right? And I just talk. So it's a little bit actually distracting for me to have a PowerPoint, and I move around a lot. But because we are videotaping, I'm going to make a very special effort to stand right here. And here's why we're videotaping. Because we want our story heard. If you go to YouTube and you type in Connie Reguli, you'll find some of my videos that I've done over the years in different forums. The one that I did in January I called for a meeting in my office in Middle Tennessee, and I had about 10 people show up, and we went on live, and we put up a video camera as best we could. It was an hour and 45 minutes. Within 3 days, I had 3,400 hits, and 3,400 people had watched that video. I've had people call my office, walk in, want to know the story. It's also gotten that story out there to other people that we need to hear. Community leaders that don't believe it. They don't believe this is going on. And I'm going to tell you a real scary analogy. I'm not really a big history buff, but I am real interested with the concept of Nazi Germany. There was an article in the American Bar Association Journal a few years ago, and I was reading that article, and it said in that article that everything they did was legal. Because here's what happened. They created laws, and then they put their judges in place, and then they took the attorneys, and the attorneys who would support those laws would be rewarded. The attorneys who challenged those laws would be ostracized and would lose, because the whole entire system, the whole entire legal system was pushing towards their agenda. The very same thing is happening in our juvenile and family court system in this country. It makes me shudder. There are nights I can't sleep. I grind my teeth, okay? I'm old enough to retire, all right? It isn't gonna happen, because there is a story that needs to be told. And we have, for the purposes of this evening, we have titled it Fostergate. And we put a $sign under the S, because that is what this is about. Really, the story is about the federal financial incentives that destroy the families. And it is found under the Title IV funding. And let me tell you how I kind of figured that out, because you know what? This really isn't common knowledge. Here I am, I'm an attorney, I worked in the family court system for years, and I had done this, it was just maybe 6 years ago. I had a case, I'd worked with this professor of sociology at University of Michigan, and she'd written books on how to interview children who were alleged victims of sexual abuse, and I had her as an expert witness, so I had a little bit of a relationship with her. And one day randomly, way after that case was over, I sent her an email, and I said, Dr. Fowler, I says, tell me why children are getting placed in foster care and I can't get them reunited with their families. And she sent me about a 2-sentence email back, and this is from a university professor. She said, because Title IV-E funds are unlimited and Title IV-B funds are limited. And so that is what started my research. I didn't even ask her another question, because thank God for Google, right? And so I sat at my computer, started pulling up congressional reports, going through it and through it and through it, pulled my state budget, started looking at these federal budgets that were coming through, and I found out that I started to learn what Title IV-E money is. What you have to look at is the dependency system. So the dependency system is the state agencies and foster care and the Title IV money. And they are cogs that turn and intertwine. So what does it mean to the government? It means money to the government. Money that comes into the government from all different avenues. And it is a direct federal to state connection. So you have Title IV-E monies, which are the foster care monies. A use it or lose it scheme that if the states don't use the money, they don't get the same next year. It's also unlimited. Sequestration, no problem. Title IV-E money is still available. There's Title IV-D money. which some people think, well, that doesn't seem like it's directly connected to the child welfare system, but it is. Because these children go into foster care, and then the parents are required to pay child support to the state. And it's in your state law. Within 10 days of a child going into foster care, those parents are supposed to be yielded into court to pay child support, make child support payments to the state. The Title 10 funding, which is supposed to be family planning funding, the Title 19 money, and the Title 20 money. All is money connected to the child welfare system. Oh, the private sector. So the private sector has to have their hands out as well. And a lot of people quote that when Eisenhower left the presidency, he says, be cautious of the industrial military complex. Well, we have the very same thing. We have an industrial child welfare complex that has come out of layers and layers and layers of legislation. You have private hospitals who are feeding off the child welfare industry, providing that direct link between DCS and the agencies. You have private programs required by DCS and feeding off the children who are within the child welfare system. You have the state and county judiciary and the entire legal system. You have court-appointed attorneys, court-appointed guardian ad litem, court-appointed CASA workers, a huge nonprofit, all motivated to keep children involved in the system. What the result is, the children are the commodity. And they're the commodity of a broken system. They must feed the beast by an endless entry and a continuous entry of children into the system. And they know the numbers. They know the numbers in every county in the United States as to how many children they need to put in that system. And where is this happening? It is nationwide. You know, there was a time when I thought it was just Tennessee.
I used to think it was just Kansas.
We aren't in Kansas anymore. You know, and then I started connecting with other people, or I started getting calls from other people from all over the country. I started reading stories on Facebook. And that's the reason why we put together the Family Forward Project group on Facebook, so that these stories that were coming in from all over the country could converge. And it is happening right here in Sarasota, Florida. And we're here in Sarasota because Patty Welch has stepped up and she says, I'm going to open a center right here in Sarasota, Florida. We're not going to be quiet anymore. We're going to go public. The result is government-sanctioned child trafficking. Rehoming children for profit. Parentectomy, I like to call it. The total amputation of the child-parent relationship. And generational genocide. Genocide. You know, I watched on TV the other night about 23andMe or something like that, this commercial now about get your DNA tested and see where you came from, right?
Yeah, it was, what is
Ancestry.com.
that? Ancestry, yes.
Yeah. You know, they're doing, now they have a reality TV show about going back, going and finding your parents. What's the name of that show?
I can't remember.
Yeah, Where'd You Come From or something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that is it, I think.
Yeah, there's 2 or 3 different shows. Where'd you come from? It's like, if you lose that connection, if you lose that connection of knowing who your grandfather, your grandparent, your 5 generations back are, you know, sometimes I tell people the whole entire Old Testament is Jesus' genealogy, right? I mean, it is years. Do you not think it means something for us to have a whole Old Testament on genealogy? Our genealogy means something. There are certain theories that talk about, and they talked about it a little bit in this commercial, that our cells of our body have cellular memory. They know from whence they came. Generational genocide is so important and so critical for our country. Now let's talk about this system and why there's a problem. There is an antagonism within the system. There is family preservation, and there is termination and adoption, all in one system. So what does that tell you? That tells you there's a conflict of interest. You know, years ago when I first became a lawyer, I was a prosecutor. The prosecutor always has to work against the public defender's office, right? And we are totally separate agencies. The twain shall never meet. We argue all the time. We go to court and we argue against each other. But when you have an agency that has 2 functions that are diametrically opposed, what is going to happen? The side that produces the money is going to win. The side that gets the money, where it's going to collect the money, that's the motivation that's going to drive the entire agency and the entire system. We have public policy versus public dollars. So we have family preservation and we have foster care and adoption. And I'm going to show you some numbers in a minute, and you're going to see how this got so out of control. The system, the entire system, is counterintuitive to the public policy of family preservation. And I proffer to you that every state in this union has somewhere in its state code a statement that says it is the public policy of the state of blank that families be reunified. I promise you, it's out there in every code. It's in Tennessee's code. It's in several other I've pulled up. That is the public policy. Do you know what the public policy is? The public policy is what's to control our behavior, what's to control our legislation, what's to control our funding. The public policy of your state. If you enter into a contract with somebody and you go to court and the court says, well, that contract's against public policy, the contract is void. Same thing should be true of laws. If our laws and our funding are against public policy, they should be void. Our children simply are not for sale. That has got to be the message loud and clear. Our children are not for sale. The United States does not have a really good history of taking good care of families and children. You know, I've done some research on just orphanages and how children were treated over the years. And for about 70 years, from about 1850 to about 1930, we ran orphan trains. They picked up children in New York and the East Coast and Boston and the overcrowded cities and put them on trains, and they shipped them out west. And they would stop at train stations, they would line the children up on the platform, and people could go pick their children, called the orphan trains. For years, they picked up children who were living, Indian children who were living on the reservations, and they decided it was more important that those children be Americanized and sent them to boarding schools in the East so that they could cut their hair and make them speak English and dress like English gentlemen. We have a horrible reputation. We have maternity houses back in the 50s and 60s where young girls who got pregnant when it was hush hush, they would go there and their babies would be gone before they left. I was reading a case, there's an important case, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a case about a U.S. Supreme Court case, and part of the issue in that case is that this young girl was not allowed to go to school because she had cerebral palsy, and she was so grotesque that it wouldn't be appropriate for her to be seen around the other children and scare them. We have a system that has never treated children as whole, never treated children as whole human beings. As soon as we fix one problem, we've got another. Children, here is what you must remember and what our message must be. Children have a constitutional right to. It is already reported in a United States Supreme Court case that children have constitutional rights. So children have the right to family integrity. It's already been decided, folks. This is not new. It has already been decided by the United States Supreme Court that children have constitutional rights and they have family integrity rights. That's why these issues of lowering burdens of proof and putting guardian items in and best interest of the child should never dominate in the courtroom. Should never dominate. How do they do it? They lower the threshold of neglect. Children who are truant from school don't need to be with those parents. Children who miss a couple doctor's appointments don't need to be with those parents. Children who, toddler who walks out of the house while the parent happens to get distracted, that's a neglectful parent. You know, these are children, and you're going to see some more numbers here. These are not children who are being abused and tied to beds and not being fed and starved. This is neglect. This is, you've seen some of these cases. People let their children walk home from their car coming home from a restaurant 3 blocks and let them walk. That's neglect. They remove children without hearings. I put IPA down here because almost in every state there's what's called an immediate protection agreement, which would lead you to believe This is something you agree to. This is a trap. Well, just let us take your children, and we're going to just we'll go to court in a couple days, and you can tell the judge your side, and then, you know, the judge will probably have you do a couple things, and then you get your children back. No. You know what? They can't walk in your door and put you in jail and say, you know what, we heard that you robbed a Bank of America. We heard that, and we can't tell you told us. Can't tell you that. But we heard that, and we're going to go ahead and put you in jail. And in about 3 days, we can go to court, and we can have a hearing, and you can tell the judge your side of the story. But by the way, I got that in here somewhere else. When you go to court, reliable hearsay is going to be admissible. So you go to court in 3 days, somebody's accused you of robbing Bank of America, and you go in there, and this stranger, this person that you've never seen, gets up there and go, you know what? I was on the phone with the manager at Bank of America, and they told me exactly what the person looked like that came in and robbed them, and that's the person. They can keep your children in foster care at that level of evidence. Probable cause on reliable hearsay? Are you kidding me? The government, the constitutional standard for interfering with your right to parent your children is a substantial risk of harm by clear and convincing evidence. You need to memorize those words. Those words needs to be on the lip of every parent. They allow hearsay, the one I just told you about. They have a low standard of proof at removal, which is probable cause, which I call now the red flag standard of proof. The judge goes, well, you know, it's a red flag that, you know, your children weren't at school yesterday. It's a red flag. You were late for court that, you know, that's a red flag. So I'm really concerned. We have this concern, Judge. Concern is not evidence. Red flag is not evidence. Criminals have more rights in the courtroom than parents do.
That's right.
Criminals have a right to be Mirandized before they tell any government person about something that could be used against them. They have a right to have an attorney present. They contract with local hospitals to make findings of abuse and neglect. Now, I'm sure I'm going to get some pushback from this because, oh, we don't pay them to make findings of abuse. Yeah, but here's what you do. Let's take Tennessee, because every state has a children's hospital, and I just happen to be closer to Tennessee, the Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. They have created what they call a care team. Every month that care team gets together, and guess who's there? You have a child abuse specialist, you have law enforcement, and you have DCS. And that doctor gets in there and they go, well, you know, about 2 weeks ago, there was this child that came in with a little crack on his knee, and I just don't know, I just don't think that child's very safe. You need to go get him, and they will do it. The parents don't even know that meeting exists. Now, I think there's a little bit of a HIPAA violation here, that the parents are not even being notified that that doctor is talking about their child's medical condition when it certainly wasn't serious enough to report it the day it occurred, or wasn't serious enough to remove that child for substantial risk of harm. That is a HIPAA violation. Parents are entitled to know. They make parents attend the programs created and paid for by the state and their private companies. So this contract therapist comes into the home and says, now you really need to be honest with me. And, you know, this is all confidential here, so really be honest, because I really want to get down to the root of the problem. And the parent sits there and he goes, you know what? Just to be honest with you, you know, me and my wife don't belong all the time, you know, and sometimes I just so mad at her about the way she's disciplining the children. What happens? That person, a month later, is sitting in the courtroom and saying, Judge, you know what? And I go, whoa, 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 it's confidential. No, it's not confidential if you're called into court. Judge, this person, he admitted that him and his wife had problems and he didn't really trust her raising the children. It's all a scam. It's all a scam. They lie in reports. They flat out lie in reports.
Yes, they do.
They have I had a social worker sitting in the courtroom, and I had her records in front of me, and she goes, well, Judge, I indicated right here that on August the 2nd, I called the mother 3 times. I go, really? I go, so is that the phone number right there you put in your records that you called her at? She's like, yeah. And I go, Judge, would you call that number right now for me, please? Judge is up there. Some stranger answers the phone. They didn't even have the right phone number in the records. And they lied about it. And they will lie about it. They make it impossible for the parents to complete the task. They go, yeah, well, if you just finished that assessment, and they're like, okay, well, I've been to 6 classes. We seem to be talking about the same thing over and over. I don't feel like I'm any different person than I was 2 months ago. And they're like, well, what does your therapist recommend? Well, I keep counseling. Well, then you haven't completed it. So what's the completion? There is no measurable concept for these agencies to be satisfied that a parent has completed those requirements. Or they fail to acknowledge that the parents have completed it and just ignore that they even did it in the first place. They appoint attorneys that are sympathetic to the system, and they appoint guardian ad litem's who are sympathetic to the system. Now let me tell you what my experience is and how I see this work. So you have a judge, and the judge has his little group of people that he appoints, right? And so sometimes those people are appointed as a parent attorney, sometimes they're appointed as guardian ad litem. So they just kind of play off that role one at a time. Now let me tell you something. I've worked with judges a long time. Do you think a judge would rather have a 5-day trial with 2 experts and 10 witnesses where he has to take notes and make a decision? Or would that judge rather have an attorney walk in and say, well, Judge, you know, we're just going to stipulate to the lowest level of neglect, and they're going to do the program, and then get their children back? Who do you think the judge likes better, right? Judges don't like to do that kind of intensive trials. They don't want to work that hard. It is too hard. And these are complex, hard cases. They make the parents pay child support for removed children. You know, this one always gets me right in the gut. And there is a special provision under the child support guidelines that specifically says that for children in foster care, the courts are entitled to give deviations and lower it if a parent comes in and says, well, Judge, I can't do this, 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 and this. They don't do it. And so they set these so many families who are just barely making it anyway. I mean, families who are working in the service industry, who are working in, you know, just factories, small towns. I've seen huge targets in small towns where there's not a lot of really, you know, decent jobs available. These parents are barely making it. And then they order them to pay child support, which they order this really high standard for child support, and then those very same parents are expected to take off from work to go attend the programs, to take off from work to go sit in supervised visitation. I mean, they make it absolutely impossible. I actually, and I'm going to touch on this, sympathetic attorneys, I actually have a lawsuit filed against a court-appointed attorney in a case where I'm representing a young man. And she was his court-appointed attorney during the dependency process. And her attorney now comes in and she didn't have anything to do with his TPR. That was after the fact. That was a year later. Another attorney represented him in TPR. I said, no, Judge. She was his attorney during the entire dependency process when all these burdens were put on him that he could not accomplish. So she had a duty during that time period to at least provide a defense for him. Oops. They limit the contact with the children, which is emotionally draining. Oh, it's emotionally draining. These, you know, the minimum by federal guidelines is 4 hours a month. That is the minimum. DCS, CPS, they think they're doing you a favor if they give you 4 hours a month. It is so draining, and these poor children who were with their parents every day are now limited to 4 hours a month. They lie to the children. Your parents don't want you anymore. Your parents are not going to be able to keep you anymore. You're not going to be able to go home. They lie to children. They fail to disclose favorable reports to the parents. They fail to tell the parents about favorable things that come back. The whole secrecy of the system is compelling because you have secret reports that are filed. You know, guardian ad litem's file secret reports. CASA workers file secret reports. DCS or CPS, the agency, files a secret report with the court, and they never even give it to the parents. They don't even give it to the parents' attorneys. I am shocked every time. I say, I want all your records. I ask the agency, I want all your records. Once in a while, they give me all the records, and I find the secret reports that they filed with the court. It's all a big secret. Before you walk into that courtroom, your client is already set up. That's called ex parte communication. That is illegal in every other litigation scenario that I can possibly think of. I can't possibly think of a time where somebody would send a letter to the judge that I would not receive a copy of prior to walking into the courtroom, or a letter to the judge at all. They cut the children off from all contact with the family. They coerce the children into statements, making false statements, or silence them under threats of never seeing mommy and daddy again. I actually had one case out in near Chattanooga, and there had been some allegations that the children had just been sort of sexually inappropriate. It just needed to be investigated. The parents were willing to cooperate. And the little boy made a statement to the DCS worker, but then he went home and he told his mommy that, Mommy, they told me if I told too much, I would never see you again. They pay mental health professionals to diagnose the children with severe psychological damage.
Why?
I mean,
Tell them why.
Well, you know, everything I have put in here, I have personally seen or tried to defend. They can get, the reason they want severe psychological damage is because they can immediately terminate parental rights if they can get a psychologist to show that there is that they could be severely psychologically damaged or developmentally damaged in the future. To the extent that it might affect their ability to live in a normal life. I'm like, so removing them and putting them in foster care didn't do that?
I noticed that if they want to do that they want their professionals. You can't work
Yes.
through your community,
Right,
who
they
you
do.
know.
Yeah, they don't allow you to bring your own.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course, they drug the children.
Mhm.
This is huge. So many children go into foster care and end up on medication. It's just, that part is really heartbreaking. They allow the children to get abused in foster care and threaten them not to tell. And we all know that story as well. The laws allow it. The laws allow the hearsay in the removal hearings. They allow removal without a hearing. They allow the secret records. They refuse to disclose the recorder. Again, you know, it's like if you rob a bank or somebody does a police report and there's a police investigation report, it tells in there where they got the information. Now, I can understand in theory this might be a good idea, but we have people who are making false reports over and over and over, and they've never done anything. A couple of weeks ago, a woman walked in my office and she said, I've had 100 reports filed on me and they've never found anything, and I'm tired of being harassed and they won't tell me who's doing it. There's no internal accountability. There is no internal accountability. I sent a letter to our state agency and I said, I would like to file a report on this social worker for her violation of the law and bad conduct. Can you tell me exactly where that report goes to? Well, we don't really have a department that handles that, so there's no internal accountability. We had a oversight commission that was created when our state agency was created in 1994, and they never created the oversight committee. In 2011, I was rambling through some laws, and I find the oversight committee requirement, and it says that the government appoints so many people, the Speaker of the House, and so I filed a mandamus in Chancery Court, trying to get the chancellor to compel them to create the oversight committee. She refused to grant my request, and within 3 weeks that law was repealed. Now, do you think anybody was talking about it? There is no requirement to place with another family member. Well, yeah, there is a requirement, but they just totally ignore it. Here's just a few examples of people I either have known or I've talked to. This is a child that was cut off from DCS by an immediate protection agreement. It took 18 months to reunite that family. Here's another one where a juvenile court judge did an ex parte stopping on the visitation. Didn't even have a sworn affidavit in that. Took another 18 months. Here's one in which this little child who's 7 months old had rolled off the bed, had a small fracture in his knee. She goes to Vanderbilt Hospital. They hold her hostage there for 9 hours and tell her that she's abused her child. She refused to turn her child over, and they put her in prison. and told me, I met with the police detective called me, and I said, look, all I wanna do is have a meeting with DCS and get this resolved. They called DCS right there, and DCS said, not till you give us the baby. I went to the judge and I said, Judge, we just want a hearing before you remove. Nope, can't have a hearing before you remove, because it's called a removal hearing, so you have to have a hearing after we take the child. Babies are a high commodity.
They are.
High commodity. You know, in this particular case, the mother had had one, she might have had 2 positive drug screens early in her pregnancy. I think the first one she didn't even know she was pregnant. She had used some opioids, some painkillers, but she stopped. She stopped when she knew she was pregnant. But it was in her medical record, in her prenatal records, that she had had a positive drug screen. They came to the hospital when that baby was 2 days old. The baby was fine, she was fine. There was no drugs in her system, no drugs in the baby's system, no drugs in the meconium. In 2014, they walked in there. She happened to call me up. This was happening on Facebook. I was watching it occur. She posted, they just walked in here and told me I couldn't see my baby. I called her up. I said, give me the number of the nurse's station. I called them. This is July the 3rd. July 4th was on a Friday. I said, give me the number for the nurse's station. I talked to the nurse and I said, you better not let that baby go with somebody else unless you have a court order or a warrant. I says, I want her records right now. Well, you can't get her records now. We'll go get her. I need a release. We'll go get a release. You have a release form right there at your desk. You can walk down the hallway. Because that was in Knoxville. I was in Nashville. She goes, well, no, and it'll take until Monday before we can get that. On July 4th, on the Friday morning, those DCS workers knew that I had been on the phone with this girl, and they found a magistrate who would get up out of bed and give them a removal order on that child. And you know what their cause for removal was? That they had had prior reports, prior history, too much prior history with the department. This is another family out of Missouri. Refused to place the child with the grandmother, and within weeks that child was bruised, busted lips. Never, she still cannot go home with her grandmother. False charges out of Texas. This little boy, adorable as he is now deceased. He was adopted when he was 2 years old by this woman who lived in Texas. That she had gone to Oklahoma, some strange events happened. Anyway, she ended up with this little boy. She was allowed to adopt him. She took him home. She had 6 other children. They didn't tell her this little boy had AIDS. 2 years later, when he was 4 years old, he died. And got sick and died fairly quickly. They came and arrested her and her husband and put them in prison and took their 6 children. All 6 children ended up in prison. People came to her house and wrote in spray paint, baby killer.
Oh, gross.
I mean, she got her children back. It took over a year. Her children were abused while they were in foster care. Blaming the parents. Sometimes parents think, oh, Department of Children and Family Services, call them up. You know, I have a child who has autism. I need some help. I have a child who's acting out. I need some help. And they reach out for help, and they take their children. All of them. All of them. This is the one I was talking about before. Coerced this little boy who was 5 years old and told him that if he told too much, he could lose his parents forever. Criminals have more rights. Criminals have a right to a fair hearing. They have a right to all evidence that's in their favor. It's called exculpatory evidence. They have a right to face their accuser, the person who made a report against them. They have a right to an evidentiary hearing. They have a heightened burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They have a right to a jury trial, and they have a right to attend and participate in drug court. And the reason I put this in here is because drug court and taking children for drug use is huge business. And these, opiate addiction is huge. And, but these mothers need help. These mothers don't need to be losing their children and placing these children and selling these children and farming out to other people. Here, I put up a survey. Here's what people said about their child welfare experience. Ask if they were placed under a permanency plan or a family services plan. Oh yeah, about 60% of them were, okay? Did the state fairly evaluate the needs of your family? 80% said no. Were the requirements on you reasonably related to the reason the children were removed? 63% said nope. Did the resources provided satisfy the agency once you engage the service? Nope. In your opinion, did the state agency appear to be sabotaging your ability to complete the requirements? That is a whopping 68% yes. Did the agency do their part in providing you all the resources needed to satisfy their demands? 72% no. Did you complete the services on the plan? Almost 60% of them said yes. Were your children returned when you completed the plan? 60% said no. Were you treated fairly? 80% said no. This is just a brief thing about sort of what I pulled from Tennessee funding. It shows the complexity of all the different funds that are going in. You will see the Title IV-E up in the corner and Title IV-B at the top are direct federal funds. So you might look at that and go, well, that doesn't look like a huge part of the entire budget. So what else do we have? SSBG, Social Services Block Grant, federal money. And then you have over here Medicaid, federal money. The federal dollars that flow into the child welfare system are about at least 1 for 1 and probably even more. So when the state is pumping, as you will see, $8 billion when the federal government is pumping $8 billion into the child welfare system, you can double that. Easy, double that. It is a $16 billion industry. Kids Count Data Center, a very reliable source for getting data. There are special commissions within each state that provides the data. I don't know how they collect it, but they provide the data to Kids Count. And this one is for Tennessee. Now, these are children committed to state custody. And the reason I put some of these in here and pick some of these states out is what is important for you to see is it is pretty much a straight line graph. There is a quota of a number of children that they must keep flowing through these state agencies. The same thing with children exiting foster care. These are children remaining. That means that there is always a constant number of children within the system. Iowa, I was going to go do a presentation in Iowa, and I pulled their numbers. Interesting, the children who were declared child abuse and neglect had dropped substantially in 2004. But when we looked at, and then we started to see a little bit of a drop in the children entering foster care, but the children exiting foster care remained the same. And the children in foster care is a straight line. Okay, so however they made those other numbers work, I'm not sure, but they maintained 6,500 children in foster care. Florida. Children entering foster care, 16 to 18,000 a year. Now I'll tell you, this is comparable Arizona. Arizona is crazy, and they are doing the same thing. They're running about 16 to 18,000 children a year through foster care. The children exiting foster care, Florida, 14 to 16,000. Here's a very important chart. Reasons for placement in foster care. These two arrows show you that there's 52% of those children are under the category of neglect, and 47% of those children are in other missing treatment type, or missing maltreatment type. Missing maltreatment type means they don't know what to call it. All right? But this is 90% of the children. 90% of the children, they can't even tell you exactly why they're in foster care. This is for the children that are going into adoption, and up here you see that about 23% of those children are going to be rehomed into adoptive homes. And I pulled this one off. Children adopted out of foster care, look at the largest number, 1 through 5. 1 through 5. High commodity, young children under 5 years old. This is national data. Even from the national standards of all the data they collect, they say that 75% of the children are there in foster care because of neglect. This is the national data. 1,500 children in 1 year died from child abuse. This is a federal budget. This is the budget under Health and Human Services, and it shows you where this entitlement money is going. 15% of it is going to foster care and permanency. And here's the important number to look at. Title 4E and Title 4B. This is critical. You can see here that the Title 4E money is $7 billion a year. The Title 4B money is $600 million. That is 10 times the amount of money for child reunification, for child family stability, for doing helping families. It is 1/10 of the money that is used to keep children in foster care. And look at this. This is the percentage of children that there will be a reoccurrence of abuse under these certain conditions. If they go back to the home, bio or adopted, if it is formal kin care is the lowest percentage of any reoccurrence of abuse. You would think that that number alone would help the agencies and control the agencies in what they look for to place children. Now, this also is interesting because this is also federal numbers. See where the big arrow goes, the 0. This is family connection grants. This is the money that was intended to help relative placement. It fell from $15 million in 2014 to zero. Now, I'm a nerd enough, especially a legal nerd enough, to want to go back and track the whole entire history. This is where you start looking at what were the child welfare laws. There were no child welfare laws or child agencies for years and years. And when the states created a Department of Health and Human Services, that is the only place that they had to handle child abuse and child investigations. In 1974 is the Kickstarter. 1974 is the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, and it's often known as the Mondale Act. This was the first bill that really created this global fund by the federal government that says we're going to give this money to the states, and they're going to have certain requirements that they have to do. And then you have the 1978, what's called the ICWA, or the Indian Child Welfare Act, 1980 Adoption Assistance, 1988 Child Abuse Prevention, 1992, 1993 Family Preservation, 1994 Multi-Ethnic Placement, 1997 Adoption and Safe Families Act. I want to talk about a couple things on here. The Indian Child Welfare Act. The Indian Child Welfare Act says if you're a Native American Indian, you get more protections than the rest of us.
Only if you have.
Only if you're
Right.
registered.
Well, yeah. Well, it doesn't specifically say that in the law, but here's what's critical about it. It says not only do they need to be placed with family, here's the most important part of it. The legal standard under ICWA is beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the highest standard of proof. That's the same thing for a criminal. That's the same thing in going into criminal court, is beyond a reasonable doubt. And the law says beyond the reasonable doubt by expert testimony. So they have to show that the child is subject to abuse or neglect beyond a reasonable doubt by expert testimony to take an Indian child. That is a violation of equal protection. And nothing against Native American Indians, but their parent-child relationship is no more important than every one of yours. That protection should be given to everybody. And now let's talk about the 1997 Adoption and Safe Families Act, or also called ASFA. This is a Bill and Hillary Clinton act. Even in the Democratic Convention, I've listened because I knew he would say something about it. Bill Clinton talked about how proud he was of Hillary for marching through the Hill and making sure that ASFA passed. ASFA was the very first bill that put a bonus on every child's head. Every child that was to be adopted out of the child welfare system was going to render the states a bonus check for $4,000 to $6,000. In addition to that, there were other additional things that if you adopted a child, you were going to continue to get benefits, okay? So you continue to get medical care, you continue to get payments, you continue to get all these special services. That money has now increased. Huge conflicts of interest in this industry, and I'm going to give you a very clear example. This is Tennessee. Commissioner at the helm. In 2011, our governor, Bill Haslam, conservative Republican supposed to be, appoints his buddy, Jim Henry, to head up the Department of Children's Services. He was the CEO of Nashville-based OmniVisions, the largest private agency doing business with the Department of Children's Services. The largest contractor, and there's the contract. $51 million for 1 year during the year that he served as commissioner. I started making a lot of noise on this on social media, and I'm telling you, it works, okay? Making noise works. He served in that capacity for about 4 years, and then, he decided he'd rather serve as the governor's chief of staff. So he was taken out of that agency. Now, let me tell you, I also looked up salaries, state salaries. He took an $80,000 pay cut, right, to leave the Department of Children's Services to serve as a chief of staff. Would anybody typically do that if there wasn't some reason to change their position? We have to have a paradigm shift in child welfare. One of the things, I've done several things to reach out. I've been on several radio shows. I did a sort of my own little speaking tour in Tennessee on the Indigent Task Force when I had judges and all these people from the government sitting up there, and that's on YouTube if you want to watch it, and I only had 10 minutes. But these are some of the things that I've talked about. We have to prohibit conflicts of interest with the agency and the private contractor. So the very agency itself has to be dissembled. Our child welfare has to be dissembled. If somebody is abusing or neglecting their children, it is criminal. It needs a criminal investigation. If we're going to have a service organization within our government, it needs to do what it says it's going to do. Children's services needs to be children's services. We have to enhance the screening and the services that are provided for family. We have to incorporate law enforcement in child abuse investigation. We have got to move towards family stability and relative placement. And we must have oversight, accountability, parent advocates, reporting mechanisms, and a Family Integrity Act. What do we do? We have to have a critical mass of people. I started talking judicial integrity several years ago, and from that angle, and I talked to several reporters and other people interested in promoting and starting promotions and nonprofits, and they says it takes a critical mass of people. We have in the Family Forward Project group on Facebook about 5,400 people. When I went up to Washington a year ago and I lobbied, which I'm not a lobbyist, but I would walk in the office and the very first thing I would say to the people at the front was, my name is Connie Reguli and I'm here with the Family Forward Project, and we have a grassroots effort through social media of about 5,400 people. Now this was before Trump won through Twitter too, but as soon as I said 5,400 people, I at least got noticed. Every time you talk to a legislator, they want to know one of two things. How many people do you have behind you, or how much money do you have? So you have got to grasp on to that benefit that we have. But because before I had that group, I went and I talked to our Congressman Cooper out of Tennessee, and I went into his office and I sat down and I talked to him. And I couldn't tell him, it was before we really had the strength of the group, and I couldn't tell him that. And he treated me with such disdain. And he believed that I was there just to try to get some client of mine out of trouble for abusing their children. We have to rehabilitate families. We've got to change laws. We've got to demand waivers under Title IV-E. We've got to have accountability, and we've got to have family advocacy. It's so important that we connect. I am so excited that just so many people have taken the effort to come here and be eyes on today. I mean, I work a full-time job. I have cases. I have a real heavy caseload. I have family. I have all these things going on in it, just like everybody else's life. And Facebook is so great that we can connect there and stay connected and share stories and bring people together. And people are always private messaging me, and I can't even respond to half of them. But that cannot stop. So we have got to now start looking as to the states, and we've got to start looking at how to get leaders in each state. And I'm so glad Patty's here in Florida. I've got a couple people up in Connecticut that are really pushing. They're pushing for trading care for custody, which we haven't even talked about. I've got a great guy, Nick in Iowa, who's got a grassroots group going, and we have with us tonight, we have Jennifer Winn from Kansas, and she is really rallying support in Kansas and really just, tried different things. It's all a work in progress. We're going to make mistakes, but we have to keep that going. And I'm going to have Jennifer just talk to you about the heart of what she's doing and how she has helped families, how she has organized her efforts. And I just want you to take all these words in your head, in your heart, and I want you to be able to look for either to step up yourself as a leader in your state, in your community, or to look for people who can, I've tried to connect people through Facebook if they're in the same state. If you see somebody in Facebook that's got something going on and they're in your state, make a direct connection with them. I know there's some state pages. Again, it's a work in progress. It's a little disorganized, I think, but we're considering we have probably 10,000 people out there. The group out of California has about 10,000 people on their side. There's a lot of crossover, but I want you to just take this all to heart, and I am going now. My new best friend, Jennifer Winn.
So I want to tell you guys how this came to be for me, because I don't have any children in this system. I don't have any grandchildren in this system. I don't have any cousins, aunts, uncles. No, I don't have anybody. What happened was, with my own son's case, it made me wake up. And so I took a stand, and I said, okay, let me get this straight. And this is off the subject. This is not the same category that affected me. But my son had ran into a high school friend, played football at Northwest right down the street from our house. And basically, long story short, because I'm just going to give you the short version, this friend asked him if he could get pot. My son called a friend who called a friend. And long story short, this guy showed up that he went to school with, I know this kid, with two people he'd never seen before. They shot my son, left him for dead. They shot the guy who had the pot, which was a state senator's brother. And then they wanted to lock my kid up for 25 years minimum. Not acceptable. Not in my world. So I stood up. And I started yelling. And I didn't stop yelling. And July 31st will be 2 years my son was acquitted of first-degree felony murder. Because felony murder is much different than murder. Because in felony murder, you don't kill anyone. So I decided at that point that I was going to take a stand in my state, and I was going to run for governor. People said, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't run for governor. You need to start at city council first. We have a pecking order. I said, well, let me tell you what you can do with your pecking order. Because I am running for governor. And I will tell you that as an unknown, I raised $17,000 because I'm horrible at asking people for anything. Because I'm very independent. I've always been that way. Well, I'm only one woman, and I too have to work for a living. I too have 10 grandchildren and 4 children of my own. So it does become consuming when you have all of these cries. So then I too started digging. And I want to tell you something. and I don't think I've mentioned it to very many people, but I didn't know who Nancy Schaefer was. Does anybody know?
Yep.
Okay. The first time, I'll never forget, it was a year ago in November. Here I'd been out fighting, I'd been out protesting, I'd been making banners and signs and doing everything I knew to do to fight for these families. Never once did I know who Nancy Schaefer was. And a year ago in November, I watched her video. And I sobbed, and I sobbed, and I sobbed. Because she said the very words that I'd already concluded. They're kidnapping children. I couldn't believe that a senator had already exposed this in 2007. And this is now 2014? What? And this is still happening? What? So, I decided at that point that amongst many other things that I advocate for, this was going to take precedence. Because there is no greater commodity than our children. And if we don't stand up and we don't change the future for my grandbabies, for your grandbabies, what's to come of them? And that's not acceptable. That's just not gonna happen without a fight. So I started fighting. I couldn't get anywhere. I went to legislators, I went to senators, I did everything that I could think of to do. And nobody cared. We'll march all over this country for a bathroom.
That's right.
But the greatest possession we have in this country isn't worth anyone's time. And I couldn't grasp that. These aren't my children I'm fighting for, they're yours. So where is everybody else? So I decided that, okay, y'all aren't gonna listen to me? You don't have a choice. When I show up on your doorstep screaming, and I'm a good screamer, by the way. A few of you in here know that from Washington. So that's what I did. So April 1st last year was our first rally. And let me tell you something, that made history. I rallied 200 victims together in Topeka. And I've never seen such an overwhelming, beautiful sight in my life as when we were at the DCF building and they started closing all 3 stories of blinds, locking doors. They were scared. There's 200 people on our sidewalk. How'd that happen? I mean, we've violated First Amendment rights for so long and kept these people quiet for so long. How is there over 200 people on our doorstep? See, what I didn't know was that there is no in the best interest of the child. It's what's in the best interest of the state. And that's disgusting. So what I decided to do was, okay, y'all want to kidnap kids? I want to expose kidnappers. So I started going with my little phone, and I would take copies of social workers. And as they come across, you know, the ones that I could grab and find out what's going on, I would expose them. And they hate it. They hate it so much, you can no longer walk in the juvenile courthouse with a phone. Plastered all over the doors. No phones allowed. You got to take it back out to your car. Because they don't want to be accountable. Not only are they, Connie's right, there's no accountability internally. But they don't want anybody to know. Shh. You will smile while we kidnap your children. You will like it that they're on psychotropic drugs. And as a matter of fact, let's go ahead and order you on psychotropic drugs too. So that you'll shut up. This is America. This is the United States of America. And we, the people, have failed our children. End of story. And about one more protest of thousands of people with bathrooms, while our children are dying and suffering, and I will be right in the midst of them telling them what I think. And I don't care if I have to fly to Washington to do it. Because how dare they? How dare, I had this pastor on my Facebook and said, we're right there with you. We don't think that this should be happening either. Really? You're right there with me, huh? Well, where are you when I'm protesting DCF? You're with me? Are you, Pastor? Because last time I checked, now mind you, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but I am a Christian. I have wrote cantatas for my churches, produced them, had standing ovations, more people in the church since the history of the doors opening. And these people claim that same thing, that are knowingly ripping children out of the arms of loving parents. They're a disgrace, is what they are. And I have no sympathy for any of them. I don't have sympathy for the judges who negate their responsibilities. I had a GAL send one of the attorneys that I work with an email that says, she was ordered to stay off Facebook, and apparently if she can't be ordered to stay off Facebook and follow that order, she's not competent to be a parent. So, what I have figured out is they hate exposure. They hate it with a passion. So, what I do is I pay people to go monitor the parking lots, snap pictures as they're coming out the doors. We can't go in and snap them. Stop me from snapping them when they come out. Because I'm going to expose them, I'm going to keep exposing them. Now what I've learned is, because we have met so much opposition, when I go to do a protest, I've been making it public so that everybody can participate. I've only met with things like, oh yeah, we had a massive email go out in DCF, Jennifer Winn's coming, everybody leave at noon.
Yeah.
What they do? They clear their offices when I'm coming. So guess what? It's all underground now. You won't know when I'm coming. And I want you to know that. Because I'm going to keep exposing them. Somebody said to me, all social workers are bad. No, they're not. No, they're really not. The problem I've identified is the good ones leave abruptly, quickly. You wonder why there's a high turnover? There's a high turnover because once the social workers figure out that everything that we're saying is true, they want no part of it. They're just out. They need to stand up. That's what they need to do. They need to stand up. The problem is the fear. It's the fear factor. They're fearful of the retaliation. The same applies with attorneys. I have a lot of attorneys that don't like me. They don't like me because I say the truth and I say it bluntly. I'm very blunt. The reality is, in Kansas, we're in trouble. Unless I go to law school, which I don't want to do. Because I could not do your job. I could not sit in a courtroom. I'd be disbarred in the first week. So why am I going to go spend thousands of dollars to become a lawyer to be disbarred? I make bigger progress outside the courtrooms. And that's what we all need to be doing. Somebody said to me last week, Jennifer, I need you to come to Virginia. I can't. I can't. You need to do what I'm doing. I don't know how. You don't know how to take a picture? You don't know how to, I just looked at your Facebook. You're real good at making Facebook posts. Don't tell me you can't. Anyone can do what I do. Anyone. It doesn't take a rocket science. It doesn't take a degree. It just takes passion for our children. That's what it takes. Connie talked about the pharmaceuticals. She talked about a lot that I can relate to. I have a case that we refer to as the morphine baby. We had a mom who I delayed my vacation. My husband wasn't very happy about that, but we did it anyway, and we still got out of town. But we were just about 5 hours late. I got a phone call early that morning that a mom was at Wesley Hospital in St. Joseph. And Wesley Hospital, in my opinion, is the biggest kidnapping hospital that we have. St. Joseph Hospital's next. You can't even take your children to the emergency room without a threat of them being taken. You can't. I have 2 cases right now where mom said, my son's sick, I need to take him to the hospital. Hospital says, yeah, he doesn't weigh enough.
Right.
Even though mom's size 1, and the little brother that's 3 years older is this big around. They take him. I've never seen anything like it. And I couldn't understand why the hospitals were so engaged. Dr. Siri in Wichita, Kansas, in my opinion, is nothing but a paid kidnapper. That's all he is after this case. So I had a mom that went into the hospital. She went into labor 2.5 hours away from her home. She had a Percocet that she had been prescribed several months previous, and she had like 2 left in her purse. I can't say that I'm any different. I think I've thrown medicine away sometimes at 6 years old, and I'm terrible about that. But this mom had a Percocet and went into full labor. She was dilated to 7 when she got to the hospital. So she takes 1 Percocet for the 2.5-hour drive to get her to the hospital, praying she doesn't deliver on the way. She gets to the hospital, she tells the nurse, I took 1 Percocet 7.5 2 hours ago. Doesn't think anything about it. I get the phone call the next morning. They're coming to take my baby, please come. So I fly to the hospital, and I'm recording everything. That's in Kansas, though, we get a right to record any conversation we're a part of. We don't have to tell anybody. So I'm wired pretty much all day, every day. 'Cause you never know what you might get on tape. So I get to the hospital, I get them all set up. I've got recording devices. I'm paying out of my pocket to retain an attorney, at least to get someone handling so I can go out of town. And they ended up saying that the baby was addicted to pills. Now I've got the medical records. Now I can tell you he wasn't. Now I can tell you Dr. Siri put him on morphine for the withdrawal. Mom still deals with DCF, still deals with anonymous calls, just had another one last week. And she said to me, Jennifer, when does this stop? It don't. There is no limitation. There is no limitation. Somebody can be after you with a vendetta, call 100 times, and 100 times they're going to be at your door. But here's what I started putting together. Over the 2,000 people that I've met to date, I realized something very substantial that I haven't heard you say tonight. They're absolutely re-victimizing their victims. They are absolutely re-victimizing their victims. So if you have ever been in their database as a foster child, if you have ever been in their database for a false allegation made 10 years ago, and you go to the hospital, expect a visit. Because it's coming. Because they like to re-victimize their victims. I am safe to say at about 83% of all of the families that I have interviewed, collected their data, were either in foster care, or they'd had a previous complaint made against them from DCF several years before. That's sick. That's sick. But that's what they're doing. I can also tell you that I've met 5-year-olds addicted to Xanax. You're not heroes when you're causing harm. I have news for you. And I was going to be a police officer. This is what's interesting to me, as I watched them rip a 4-year-old and a newborn out of the homes. We videotaped it, actually. And as I watched them rip these babies from mom and dad, I thought to myself, it's a good thing I'm not a cop today. Because let me tell you what kind of an American I am. You tell me to cause harm, I'm going to tell you what you can do with your badge. If I'm a doctor and you tell me that I'm going to cause harm to this family, let me tell you what you can do with your license. There is not anything that these people won't do. There is nothing. I have in my possession, by the way, transcripts that have been mutated. I've got the original court report transcript, and then I've got the changed transcript. And it wasn't too long ago that I found out about the secret social file. And I'm sitting here as an American going, okay, wait. What happened to the right to face your accuser? Well, that doesn't exist. What happened to the right to be a parent? That doesn't exist. What happened to your First Amendments? That doesn't exist. And we have cowered down and let them take that. We are the ones responsible. And I don't exclude myself in the lead. Because until 4 years ago, I had no clue. I had no clue what was going on in politics because I was too busy trying to survive and put a roof over my head. I didn't care. See, I'm not a politician. I'm just not. But I think I might run one more time. Because let me tell you, if I were to get in, and they know this, they all know this about me. If she gets in, we're going to jail. We're going to stop her. We can't let her get in because we can't buy her. She actually defends the people. We're in trouble. So they worked very hard to keep people like me in office. But that's where education becomes such a key element in elections. See, I was an independent. So let me tell you this scenario, because it's very important, because if we don't get these people out of office, nothing changes. Nothing. It's back to work, same as usual. We don't care what those people say. We're here. We won again. So we're going to keep those laws that protect our secret social file. We're going to accuse parents of being on methamphetamine, even though they're really not. We're going to tell everybody they are, because they'll never know it. I've caught them in that. I've caught them red-handed. And I can prove it. But do you think the FBI returns my call? No, not at all. So my options are to drive to Missouri, where I can get just a walk-in. Because in Kansas, that's not allowed. You're not allowed to walk in and see the Federal Bureau of Investigations without an appointment. And how do you get an appointment when they're too big a cowards to call me? So they have cornered us. You understand that? And it comes down to getting the right people in the right places to make the changes, inevitably. Because I can stand out with 200 people outside our Capitol all day long. That was 2 years ago, April 1st. What changed? Nothing. Absolutely zero. So how do we make change? We get them out. Yes, term limits for sure. Term limits, but we have to start voting in people. Well, here's what I discovered, okay, because now mind you, I'm no political guru. I had no clue what I was getting myself into when I ran for governor. I'll never forget some of the forums I went to, and I was just totally taken back, like, that guy just lied, and everybody's clapping. I don't get it. How is this? I mean, I was really blown away. But let me back up to when I first ran. I'm an independent, right? I've been independent all my voting years. Never really voted much. Because I was too busy. I was too busy. But as an independent, when I went to go run for governor, I very quickly figured out we have a problem. Oh yeah, Miss Winn, you can't just pay your $2,000 like the Republicans and the Democrats if you want to run for governor. You have to get 10,000 signatures on a petition. I'm like, wait, what? Oh yeah, and if you're an independent, you can't vote in the primaries either. They're all closed. I'm going, okay, wait. I'm a taxpayer. And you're telling me I have to belong to your party to have a voice? There's a problem. considering that 58% of Americans are independent. You want to know why we keep losing, why we keep getting handed the lesser of two evils? That's why. So first is education. You have to understand how things work. Because I had no clue until I started putting both feet on the ground and actually making myself go and making myself run. Because I'm determined that even if I lose, we're going to have conversations in these forums that you good old boys ain't ready for. And boy, they were not ready. Then the media plays a part, just like it does right now with DCF. I turned on the TV a couple months ago, and one of our anchors, our well-known anchors, Susan Peters. Lo and behold, I flip on the TV, and they have boosted their "Help Us Adopt Susan's Kids." You know, the ones that we stole from the parents for money? Yeah, let's get them homes. Let's exploit them all over the news and all over Facebook because their parents can't. In fact, we now have 3 moms in Wichita go to jail for posting on Facebook, or better yet, posting online. They've gone to jail. They've gone to jail for contempt of court because their First Amendment rights have been violated. Listen, this is bigger than anything I've ever seen in my life. And when Connie talks about genocide, that's how I feel. Because I'm watching as these children are being, not just, oh yeah, your mom's adopted, come on. No. They're like, no! And they're grasping and they're clawing, and the cops are ripping them away anyway. We don't care that there's no evidence. We were given an order. You have no idea what I want to tell those cops that come and follow an order that's absolutely unjust and immoral, unethical, inhumane. No one would ever give me such an order because I wouldn't follow it. No one has to follow those orders. They have a choice. And if they choose to do the inhumane thing, in my opinion, I have every right to expose them. I don't care what your background is. I don't care where you come from. If you harm children and families, you're the scum of the earth. And I don't care who they are. I don't care how much money's in their bank account. I don't care what position they hold politically. I don't care. I'm the loose cannon in Kansas. And I will shoot them down with every opportunity I get. By way of social media, protesting, signs, pictures, I don't care. Because let me tell you something, she's right. The judges do not do their jobs. The guardian ad litems, we have guardian ad litems that are supposed to meet with their children once a month. They're supposed to do an unbiased investigation. You know how many I've seen do it? In 4 years? None. 0. Do you think the judge cares? No. I've even gone as far as I've got grand jury indictments with their names on them. And right now I'm almost getting ready to nail Brown back, our governor. So I keep that going because I'm trying to do every avenue I can. Listen, guys, I have sacrificed tremendously. Tremendously. My business has suffered because I'm not there being the president I need to be because I'm out here protesting. Because quite honestly, my business is secondary. Those children are primary to me. That's what they are. And is it my calling to God? You know, I feel like God sometimes, you know, takes my head and just kind of turns it, goes, oh yeah, you only thought you were going that way. That's what I used to do my boy, you know, because he was hyper. 2 years old, he'd want to go every direction. I'd grab him on top of the head and go, oh no, we're going this way. That's what I feel like God did. But I'm not giving up. This is our babies. And if we let this escalate, I don't know about your percentages, but our percentages keep rising. Our percentages keep rising. And when somebody from the spokesperson stands up and says, well, I don't know what everybody's so upset about. We took 6,300 children and only 4% were substantiated abuse. So we do it all the time. What's the deal? Everybody's like, oh yeah, okay. And I'm going, okay? Have you people lost your minds? What is wrong with us? You want me to tell you the answer to that? That's what's wrong with us. We have been fed for so long. My disposition in the beginning was, they took your kids, you did something wrong, man. Why is that? That told me so. That told me so. It wasn't because I had experience. It wasn't because I didn't know. It's because I listened to what that kept saying. And Susan's kids was a great thing, right? We're not exploiting children. Oh, but we are. Because, they finalize that adoption and get a huge bonus. So it takes more than just 30, 40, 50 of us. We did make an impact with 200 people storming and stomping and screaming outside DCF headquarters in Topeka, Kansas. We made a huge difference. And that is where we also have to be protesting. Can't sit at home. Social media is great. But the reality is, like Connie said, they have a mindset that one representative told me. He said, look, we've all been trained. For every one person that stands up, we know there's 7,000 more like them. Well, what do you think they thought when 200 showed up? That was a big deal. Made every single news station in the state. That's how big of a deal it was. And I'm thinking, there should be 1,000. I was mad. I wanted 1,000 people at that event. There was like 200 and something. That's not acceptable to me. Now to them, that was quite the ordeal. Now, we are facing having a review board right now. But they just stripped the review board of its power. They can only make recommendations, not mandates. Of course they don't want mandates, because that interferes with their profit. So the reality is, cops, nurses, doctors, social workers, you have a choice. And this isn't a threat, it's a fact. You have a choice, right? And if they choose to harm our children, they choose to dissolve our family bonds, we have no choice but to fight them. Every one of them. Because I have no respect for very many anymore. Connie's one of the few attorneys, because in Kansas, they all run with their tails tucked.
That's Florida.
They're all a bunch of good old boys, is what they are. And if any of them have a little ounce of courage, that's pretty quickly dissolved after they get in the game. And that disgusts me, because I always thought, of course, I was the kid that my dad's like, you gotta go be an attorney, because I argued about everything. And I'm like, no, Dad, then he tried to get me an aircraft. No, I don't want to do that either. I'm an outdoors person, I'm a landscaper, I like to design. That's what I like to do, and I like to do irrigation and grow things, but my father always saw me as being an attorney, because I was always good at arguing, and I was always standing up for the lesser. Even in school, even in grade school. Somebody picked on one kid, then they had to pick on me too. Because that's the way I was. My grandma always told me that one day when I get to heaven, I'm going to have so many crowns because I'm the defender of all. But that's just my nature. That's always who I've been before politics, before I was here, before any of it. That's how I've always been. I just didn't know. And I think that's the case with a lot of people. They don't know. Or they don't believe it. You know what I mean? It's just so far out there that they can't grasp it. But it is real. And it's preying upon the poorest of poor. Just because you're poor doesn't mean you don't have a right to have your children. Does not mean that. That is never the intent. My tax bill, I get so angry. They take 40% of my check. And then still send me a bill. And I'm sitting there going, where did all this money go? I don't have it. I sure worked for it, but I don't have it. And then when I see organizations like this that abuse and take our money to do this, it makes my belly burn. I can't hardly take it, and I've had many sleepless nights, many times, just on the way here, four. I'm going to have in Florida. I have to call you tomorrow. You know what I mean? But it's constant. It never, ever stops. And people, I think, draw to the ones who, first of all, acknowledge. They acknowledge. So therefore, they want you to hear their story. And they want to go to the people who they feel like will actually do something and fight for them. And that's why we get inundated. But the problem is there's so many. And we're so few. And we need more. And this needs to be a conscious effort to bring this to the forefront. So last week when I had a mom call and say, I don't know what to do, I can't do this, I need you to know you can do this. Well, how? Okay, well here's how. Here's how I started. I went to DCF. Patty knows I'm real good at making signs. And I went and made signs, and I stood at DCF. And do you know, by the end of that first day, I had united over 100 families. It's not hard. Stand there with a sign that says, stop kidnapping our kids. And watch how many people come up to you and give you their phone number. That's what I started doing. I started connecting the victims, because remember something, those numbers she had up on that board, they don't lie. And that tells me we outnumber them. We just have to unite. That's all it takes. And once that happens, they're in trouble. But we start taking those steps. We start looking at getting them out of offices. We work hard. And you have to go look to see who's running, by the way. Because when I ran for governor, it was shh. Local media said, oh, no, you're not going to be in a debate. You don't have enough money. What are you talking about? In 1968, there's a fair reporting, anything public. Oh, yeah, in 1984, that was done away with. Didn't I tell you? So you have to go look. You have to go see who the candidates are. You have to go talk to those candidates. And then you have to push for them. Because if we don't get real people in there, if we don't get away from the career politicians, this country is not somewhere I want my grandchildren to be. And that's a very sad thing for me to say. Because I am an American. Yes, ma'am.
You know, they're working on a system, the same thing with adults that find themselves without families or children, where they can use the same kind of circumstance and get the money from the older people too.
Mm-hmm.
And
They are.
And you know, somebody once said, when you start giving painkillers to people, pretty soon you can excuse, you know, killing them, mercy killing,
Or
and
lethal
everything else.
injections, yes.
All these things are on the way to a place that is not what America ever was.
Correct.
So we really, really do need to be involved in.
Well, and it
find
comes,
out-
and for me, and here's where I get really, I know a lot of people get irritated with me, because I'll put an attorney in their place with it. I mean, I just will. If I know that they're on a case, and they're absolutely, this is what they'll say, just do what they say.
That's what they do say.
Just do what they say. We know you're right, but just do what they say anyway. They're cowards. That's what they are. They're cowards and they're lazy. And I have no time for either. And they don't like that. Mike Lazo in Wichita, Kansas doesn't like me. I don't care. You're still a lazy coward. And that's the reality. And I don't have any grudge against any certain, I love Connie. Because she's a fighter. Because she knows what's right. She became a lawyer to fight for what's right. And for those who don't, they disgust me, and I'll call them out all day long every day. Because I don't care what they think of me. I'm fighting for the babies. I'm fighting for the families. Period. So, forming together on social media is very important. Knowing who's running for offices is very important. Stop electing the good old boys. If you have to change your affiliation to be able to vote in a primary, do it. I've now gone from being independent all my life to Republican, and currently I'm a Democrat, probably going to go back Republican. It doesn't matter. It's all a game set up for us to lose. Do you understand? You cannot put people before party. Period. You can't. And you have to look at the logistics of where you're at, who's running, and what are they? Are they Republican? Are they Democrat? Because an independent you'll never hardly see. And there's a reason for that. So you have to play the game. You have to play the game politically. We are mothers. That internal, and I'm not putting dads down. I love dads. They're our muscles. But we have a bond with children because they grow inside of us. We have that maternal instinct. And that maternal instinct is what drives me every day to fight for children that I don't even know. And I'll never stop until it's completely and 100% dismantled. So please, look at the things that are working and start implementing here in your state, where 16 to 18,000 children are begging for your help. And thanks for coming out tonight.
Yeah. We've got to reach into every state. You know, I'm here, I'm from Tennessee, I'm here, Jennifer's Kansas, she's here in Tennessee. We'll go other places. I think we make a great team. So, you know, we'll go to Michigan, we'll go to Virginia, we'll go to Connecticut, won't we?
Yes.
Because we want this story told. And obviously, I mean, I met her in person for the very first time today, and, you know, we were cut from the same cloth. So, you know, the very same things. And I'll tell you, I'm an adopted mom. I have 3 children that were all adopted from Russia. And, you know, so I understand, but I still have that kind of bond that when I took those children on as an adopted parent, I said, I will never let you go. I will never turn my back on you. And, you know, it is so huge. And I see, just like she has 10 grandchildren, I have 4 grandchildren. I know I've got more to come. I'm doing this for my grandbabies. You know, I could walk away, I could, you know, go out of business, close my practice in a couple years, go live in the woods and, you know, read books and newspapers and drink coffee on the porch. But you know what? I had cancer in 2012 and God let me live. And there was a reason that He brought me through that. And that is why I am here, because He gave me another day. And, you know, this is going to go on, and we need to reach into our states. We need to make this change. The people that are sitting in this room, I know your heart has been touched by this in one way or another, and you've got to reach into other people. Let's collect them. Let's unite. Let's keep moving forward. And thank you.
And I'll just tell you this, like, I have 4 kids, and they all have spouses, and when I have an event, it's not an option. You're coming. It's that simple. I mean, I call cousins, aunts, uncles, kids, and they all know me well enough. Of course, you know, I'm kind of the matriarch now, but you know what I'm saying? But I don't give them an option. It's not an option. You're coming. Well, I got, don't want to hear it. And they will be there, because my husband will tell you, I'm very much a stickler for that. You know, you have to support the future of our kids. And that's how I present it. I always present it with the future of our kids.
Okay, so thank you again.